The thing that gets the financial asset is performing financially. It's treating your tenants with dignity and respect and compassion and caring about these people and caring for them when they have to go through difficult times, even when those difficult times mean that they aren't paying the rent. It is still the best thing to do to treat these people well and do what you can for them while doing what you need to do to get your financial asset performing again. Welcome to the Cincinnati Real Estate Investing Show. I'm your host, Slocomb Reed. I'm here with our co-host, Ian Cruz, and our guest today is partially me, but primarily Izzy Ong, who is the Director of Operations for TLP Property Management, my property management company. She's worked for me in a handful of capacities since the fall of 2021, working at first as a leasing agent and then working in tenant relations and working her up to the point that the property management team, the property management division within everything that Three Little Pigs does is run by Izzy. Izzy is in the Philippines. The majority of our property management team is there with her, but she is also oversees all of the local efforts in our property management division of TLP. First, let me get into the theme of this episode and why Izzy is our guest. This episode is about the eviction process, primarily in Hamilton County, but in greater Cincinnati. We want to share from our experience with the eviction process here, the number of times that we have had to go through this. We inherit a whole lot of tenants, whether it is property that I've bought in the past, or it is property that we're taking on third party, we tend to be onboarding properties experiencing distress, and we end up with inheriting a lot of below average qualified tenants. So it's a very small minority of the tenants that we place that have to be evicted, but it's not zero. It is primarily, though, the tenants that we inherit, and we're at a size now where we are dealing with the eviction process every month for a couple, maybe 3, 4, 5 tenants. Last month, it was considerably larger. Izzy, why don't you give us a brief introduction? Why don't you tell us your Cincinnati story?
Yes, hi guys. As Slocomb introduced me, I joined TLP, his company, in 2021, and he's correct. I did start as a leasing agent, and then I handled almost all of the rules until I got to a point that I am the director of operation. So almost 5 years, I have the opportunity to really go through and really learn the process of how to handle. In this case, it's really handling delinquency for all of the properties that we manage. That's where it all starts. There are instances, unfortunate, that we have to go through the eviction process and then up to the Setout process. But there is a TLP way. That's how we've been doing it for the past few years. And that is, as Slocomb mentioned, something that we would like to share.
Yeah, and I originated this process. To be clear, though, listeners, I am very much visionary, 30,000 foot view, big picture, and Izzy is much more tactical, operational, actually making things happen, which is why I'm so glad to have her as the director of operations. Between the two of us, I will be explaining, here's the way that we set up the system, here's the sentiment behind it, and Izzy can give you specific the nuts and bolts and the ways that things are actually happening because she runs that in the company. We are doing this because we know that there are a lot of people who want to get into real estate investing who worry about things like having to evict. We want to demystify the process for you. We want to add value as much as we can. Let me start by saying that hands down, the best way to handle evictions, of course, we're doing this the best way that we've ever found, but there are some key themes throughout this that I want to point out first. And the biggest thing here is that when it comes to contentious, possibly sometimes adversarial or animated issues with tenants, the best and most profitable way to operate in this business is to treat your tenants with dignity, respect, and compassion. And if you get nothing else out of spending around 30 minutes hearing how we handle evictions, then just simply coming from a place of caring about these people, even when they're in a situation where they owe you rent and they haven't paid, and you have to take legal action to either get them to pay or to leave. Caring about these people, caring about their circumstances, treating them with dignity and respect, 100% the best financial outcomes that you will see in this business, not to mention it's simply the right way to treat people as well. I want to go basically through a chronology of the eviction process. I will say, disclaimer here, we are not attorneys. This is not legal advice. We are not here to make recommendations about specific actions, messages that you should make during the eviction process. We are simply explaining the way that we do it. There are some things that we do that attorneys have told me not to do because they could increase our exposure, but we have attorneys that we work with. If you reach out to us on social media or you find TLP Property Management at our website, yourhouseofbricks.com, we're more than happy to connect you with the attorneys that we use so that they can advise you through this process as well. It starts when rent is not yet late. So the first thing that we do is in our lease, rent is due on the 1st. It's late on the 2nd, but there are no late fees until the 6th. There's basically a 5-day calendar day window in there for tenants to get their rent payments in at the beginning of the month before late fees apply. On the 5th, for every tenant for whom we don't have their rent payment logged in our property management software, AppFolio, they're receiving automated emails and text messages saying, hey, today's the last day to pay your rent without a late fee. The late fee applies tomorrow. Also, if you've already submitted a physical payment like a money order, you can disregard this message as long as you've paid in full. All those messages, every tenant, we want to make sure they get something from us before it's late so that they can avoid a late fee if possible. And then after the late fees have kicked in on the 6th, the next few days after that, every single calendar month, our tenant relations officers or TROs are reaching out to every tenant who is late to call, leave a voicemail, send an email, send a text, however we can get in front of them to figure out why their rent hasn't been paid. This is to give them the opportunity to explain their situation to us, to tell us they forgot or they thought they had it set up and it didn't go through and they'll go do it now. Are they only able to pay partially and they want to know what's going to happen if they pay partially? Do they completely ghost us and just, even though we're reaching out trying to figure out what's going on, they have no interest in talking to us? We want to make the effort to communicate with them first. Now, let me say, and then I'm going to ask Izzy to jump in. The reason why we do this is because not immediately posting 3-day notices on the 6th or the 7th, making the effort to reach out to our tenants and figure out why it is that their rent hasn't been paid, it improves outcomes for us and for our third-party landlord clients. This effort leads to more of the rents being paid than if we simply moved to post the notice the moment it was late. Izzy, do you have anything you want to add here or correct me on?
Us reaching out is the most important part. It is really having that consistent conversation with the tenants. We are very lucky and we're very proud that we have in our team really good tenant relation officers. So aside from the fact that we do bank on automation in AppFolio, we use that. We have the Realm X Flow. We do maximize that. The real secret is the human connection. So the TROs always reach out the moment, even before they generate the late fees. The tenants who, let's say, they're challenged, they know that they can now reach out to their specific TROs, to their tenant relation officer. They can already start those conversations, sometimes even before the start of the month. They're already reaching out to the TRs, telling them that I will be late this month. This is the reason. I will be making this payment. And the TROs will again untiringly explain the process that, yes, we understand that you have their challenges. And that being said, please be advised, you will still have your late fees. We will go ahead and wait. We will, in some cases, bring your concern and your request in front of the landlords if really needed for consideration, hoping that you really get to pay before you get to the point that you get endorsed. So it's really the communication. It's really the touch base. It's not just the text messages. These people, these TROs, pick up the phone, stay on the phone, talk to these people for a few minutes to sometimes up to an hour just to listen to their concerns. Of course, the whole process is very important. It's the consistency. Again, there are really challenged tenants. They do know that whatever happened, your rent will be late at the first. There will be a late fee on the 6th. Somebody will reach out to you. You can reach out back to them. There will be 3-day notices posted. At some point after that, you will be endorsed to eviction. You will be notified about your court schedule. We will continue to communicate to you. You will be advised what you need to do before you go to court. We will also help you out. This is another part of the process, is that
Izzy, we'll
at
get
the
to that here
beginning,
soon. We've got a few more things to get to before we get to that. I appreciate how organized you make us sound, Izzy. I think that's because you're organized and I
yeah,
can be big picture. Yeah, a couple of things here that she pointed out. Going back to treating people with dignity and respect, TLP Property Management is wired. Shameless plug. And yes, we are taking on new clients. That's not the reason. Trying to get new clients is not the reason why we're recording this episode in particular. We want to help newer investors navigate the evictions process. We want to make sure that the fear of this process is not the reason why people would decide not to invest in real estate. But we are wired to make sure that the people that we need to communicate with, we have someone who can answer the phone. We have someone who can call them whenever we need information from them. And so we have 2 tenant relations officers, Nate Nagano and Jay Guadis, both fantastic. Shout outs to each of you. And we have the management portfolio divided in 2, and they are each the TRO for half of the portfolio and those tenants, so that our tenants know who they're calling, who's calling them. They know who to reach out to when they have an issue that they can't just put in the tenant portal, like they need to let us know that their rent is going to be late. Another thing here that Izzy was referencing is that we're not making exceptions for basically anyone. We don't make exceptions on the late fee. The exception to the no exceptions rule is when we've taken over management of, when we're inheriting tenants, that first month, we recognize it's a new system. Very often when we inherit tenants, they actually do make that month's rent payment to the previous manager, either at the end of the last month or this month. And so we'll waive late fees that first month when we've taken over management, because we recognize it's really quick to have to learn these new systems and learn these new people. And a lot of them are not accustomed to having somebody calling them every time that there's something going on. They're just accustomed to having to go on a portal. But we have not found that there are positive outcomes from delaying the process. And this is what Izzy was getting to here, is that we're reaching out to all of these tenants to make sure they have the opportunity to communicate with us and we have an idea of what's going on. And the next correspondence they get from us is our TROs telling them that we are going to post notices. And there are a few reasons for this. One is that we're talking about the potential of someone being kicked out of their home. We really don't want it to come to that, but this is a very emotionally fraught thing, especially for the person who is suffering the risk of being removed from their home. And we want to help them navigate the process in a manner that prevents the moments of most emotional volatility, hostility, anger, disappointment, frustration. And so we don't want it to be a surprise when a notice gets posted on the door. So we're reaching out to them in advance and telling you, hey, we are posting all of our notices on the 10th and the 11th this month, or the 12th and the 13th of this month. And if you haven't paid in full, you're going to receive one. We still would rather you pay and stay, but everyone gets a notice all at the same time. It's happening on the 12th and the 13th, and you're getting one. And then when the notice is posted, which Nate and Jay, who are in the Philippines, can't do themselves, it's posted on the door. The notice is folded over so that it's not as obvious what it is. All of our notices are folded over on the door, painters taped to the door so that the painter's tape isn't going to mess anything up, but also you would have to open it to see what it is, so that if it's a multifamily in a common hallway, it's just, we're trying to do our job without advertising to all the neighbors that there's a pay or vacate notice going on. So we post it, we take pictures of it. My person locally walks away immediately and sends those pictures to Nate or Jay, and they immediately text and email pictures of the notice to the tenant so that they know that it's there. The reason being that we want to make sure they're aware that the process is happening. We also want to make sure that we're avoiding the prospect of a really hostile interaction with a tenant who's really upset and a member of my team who has to be there in person posting those notices. So the notice gets posted, and then we notify the tenant, and then it's a 3-day pay or vacate notice, meaning that if they pay, we're accepting it. To be clear, we're here for the most beneficial financial outcome possible for the landlord. Whether it's property that I own in a partnership or for a third-party clients, we're accepting the rent if they will pay in full. If they pay partially and it is accepted by the landlord, it resets the process. And so I'm not going to get into all the specifics of that because we'll run too long for the episode, but we may not accept partial payment, but we're always going to accept payment in full. We want them to be able to pay and stay. And if they're incapable, then we want them to leave as smoothly and hassle-free as possible. Definitely before the eviction is filed. Izzy is using the word endorse. When we send on day 4, it's a 3-day notice. So it gets posted on Monday. The 3 days are hypothetically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday is the day that we will be sending it to our attorney. And when we send it to our attorney, they file it immediately. The moment it is filed, it will exist in that tenant's background check in their landlord tenant history from that moment on. And so even if it eventually gets dismissed, which is always our hope, it still appears the moment it's been filed. And we make sure that the tenants are aware of that too, that the moment that we file is the moment it's going to show up in their background checks when it's run by future landlords, property managers, employers. They're going to see that someone filed for eviction against them regardless of what the outcome eventually is.
Time for the Queen City Pulse, a quick look at what's making news in Cincinnati real estate. There is a 43% drop in apartment supply. Cincinnati delivered more than 32 apartments last year, and this year it's about 1850. MMG projects about 1850 new apartments in 2026. Deliveries fall off a cliff, but absorption barely moves, near 2,000 units. When supply falls and demand holds, occupancy stays tight and rents have room to run. On the demand side, the Cincinnati Metro hit 2.31 million people as of July 2025. 2024 was the region's strongest growth year since 2010. International migration drove about 2/3 of it. For years, that growth landed in the suburbs. Hamilton County added more than 5,000 residents and led the region for the first time in decades. Cincinnati is now Ohio's economic capital. The Metro posted $198 billion in GDP in 2024. That beats both Columbus and Cleveland. It holds 8 Fortune 500 headquarters. Kroger and Procter & Gamble lead the list. GE was recently added to the Fortune 500 company list. On development, Urban Sites has more than $160 million in its pipe. The local firm broke ground in April on The Lockard, a $35 million mixed-use project in Over the Rhine. It's also building apartments across the river in Covington and Newport, Kentucky. The firm has doubled its headcount in 8 years. Finally, the fight over Hyde Park Square. Developers, including PLK, want to replace the People's Building with a 6-story project holding 161 apartments. The resident group Save Hyde Park Square calls it a cruise ship and wants a cap near 62 feet. For investors, it's a reminder that in the strongest neighborhoods, community opposition is now a real constraint. That's the Queen City Pulse. Back to the show.
We're going to be recording a special episode of the Cincy REI show here soon with guests who get to decide what we talk about, any topic they want within Cincy REI, and ask us any questions that we'll answer with full transparency. If you want to be one of those guests, it's really simple. Go to your favorite social media platform between Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn and send out a post that says you listen to the show, you like it, share that you're a fan of the podcast, tell your people that they should listen to it as well. Put a link to the podcast in your post and tag us in it, the Cincy REI show account on your preferred platform. And when we see that, we'll DM you an invite to find a time to schedule this recording with us. We'd love to have you. Hope to see you there. Izzy, do you have anything to add up to this point in the process?
I would like to highlight the other side of the story, which is the landlord side. Why is this important to the landlord, how we do things? First and foremost, again, as you have mentioned, this is a very emotionally charged situation. We are very strict in making sure that all conversation will never get to the landlord. We're not saying we're not notifying them. We're just saying that those hard conversations will stay with the property management team. There are instances that it will, very rare, but there are instances that it will get to my level, but very rare, but it will never get past my level. So if there are anything that I will have to consult the landlord, it will just be me consulting the landlord. The landlord doesn't have to deal with these things. We take care of these things for them. Another part of the process that we are very proud of is that we do take the initiative to help the tenants to seek rental assistance. So part of the conversation, even at the beginning, in our automated messages, we provide those standard or those usual institutions that helps these tenants to seek for rental assistance, like St. Vincent de Paul, JFS. We do offer that. We offer that. Go ahead. These are the institution you can ask help with. We have been working with this institution in the past, so we will help you. Just provide us the documentation. We'll go ahead and follow up. We'll even continue the
Izzy,
conversation. Yes.
yeah, Izzy, can you actually specify and share all the programs that you've referred people like?
Usually it is St. Vincent de Paul. Yeah. I'll go ahead.
We'll get to that in just a minute, Ian. And there's a reason for it that I'll get to as well. We very much want the situation resolved before we have to file. We are of the opinion that anytime we have to appear in court, everyone loses except the attorneys. When in court, TLP has the judge or magistrate has ruled in our favor 100% of the time. And that goes beyond evictions to other small claims matters, tenants disputing their ledger balance after they move out. We have a 100% success rate. The fact that we have to go to court in the first place, though, is not necessarily a failure, but it is a loss. It's not going in the win column that the magistrate ruled in our favor. So when we get to the point that we have endorsed, we notify the tenant. As soon as we have the hearing date, we notify the tenant as well. They will be officially notified by a bailiff's deputy who will put a fat sack of papers in an envelope on their door. We want them to hear it from us before they get that fat sack of papers, in part because we're trying to help them manage the emotional distress that they could be experiencing through this process. Another thing that's going on is that we want them to know that we're not new at this. This is a process that is a very well-oiled machine for us. We care about you. Our client is the landlord. We will get the outcome the landlord needs. We want to help you, but we're going through with this process as it was designed if you can't find a way to either pay or leave. So we file, we get the hearing date. Before we get to court, this is where I want to have the conversation about assistance programs, Ian, Izzy, and I do want to list them. And the reason why I was waiting until now is that any of the larger assistance programs will not kick in and will not consider applicants until an eviction has been filed. They won't allocate any funds. They will reject requests for rental assistance until the eviction is filed, which it means, on the one hand, these people are going to have this eviction filing on their landlord-tenant history and their background check before they can get assistance. On the other hand, especially coming out of COVID with the way that tenants were struggling to remain employed, and the amount of rental assistance that there was and was going around, I get where these programs are coming from, that they don't want to just be cutting checks for people willy-nilly. They want to know that there is a serious case and that they're providing support to someone who genuinely needs it. And it's a mixed bag, but the three that come to mind for me, and then Izzy, I'd rather you give the details on these because you live the details more than I do. We have Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services, which is the government entity. We have St. Vincent de Paul, which is a Archdiocese of Cincinnati affiliated not-for-profit that most people around here know for the thrift stores. I don't know if you knew this, but the money you spend in those thrift stores, one of the things it's doing is it's helping people who need help making their rent payments. They also work with several other local churches, most of them Catholic because they're affiliated with Catholic Archdiocese. But shout out to Christ Church Cathedral, the Episcopal Cathedral in downtown Cincinnati, where I used to work. I love that church. They are one of the churches that helps St. Vincent de Paul help people get out of eviction by giving them rental assistance. So shout out to Christ Church Cathedral as well. The third is the United Way. So those are the big three in my mind. I know that there are others, Izzy, and I know that a lot of times those others are Catholic organizations being coordinated by SVDP. Can you give us your take on each of the big three?
You're correct. We have noticed that it's faster to process rental assistance when the tenant, unfortunately, already have a court hearing. There are instances that it comes to a point that they already have a set out date. We have that very close call just last month, there was this tenant who already on her set out date before the assistance came. It's both an unfortunate and unfortunate situation, but thankfully she got the assistance. The other one that we have been working with consistently as well is Women Helping Women. That's another institution that has been working with several times already. Almost the same thing, so almost the same process. Maybe it's really just them really checking or really allotting their help to those people who's really in need. Recently, there's another institution that specifically helped Hispanic tenants. Sorry, I forgot the exact name of the institution, but they just basically help Hispanic tenants. When one of our TROs, Nate, had a conversation with the CEO of this institution, she specifically mentioned that they really rallied helping people, especially with the rising incidents with ICE. They did mention that. That's another thing that we have noticed. There are more people being helped by this institution just because of this trend.
Thanks for listening to this episode. My company, Three Little Pigs, and I, we're expert operators at real estate investing in Greater Cincinnati, and we created this podcast to add value to you and to anyone who wants to listen to content like this. You can also find us all over social media if that's your preference. If you're looking to engage an expert operator for your investments in the Greater Cincinnati area, please reach out to us. Our platform includes property management by me through Keller Williams Seven Hills Realty. We're also general contractors. We have in-house maintenance and in-house HVAC, and we share the entire platform with the private equity opportunities that we create. We also take on third-party clients to operate their investments as well. The property management, the general contracting, in-house maintenance and HVAC, and we can also do a lot of the residential sales. So if you're an active or passive investor looking to partner with an expert Cincinnati operator, please reach out to us. You can find our contact info in the bio. Which of these organizations are not going to provide any support until an eviction has been filed?
They will start the conversation during the point when the tenant notified them that they are delinquent. However, I don't know what's happening. It just dragged on up to the point that they already have a eviction hearing or a court date. That's the only time that we will get a confirmation from this institution like JFS or St. Vincent de Paul that yes, we are going to pledge this certain amount, or that we will be sending, or we are already sending a check for this certain amount, and it will take 30 to 45 days, for example, or 2 weeks before you get the check. And that's the only time that we can actually take action, because we need to have confirmation, written confirmation that we are going to receive a renter assistance for this specific tenant before we even make the decision of considering to dismiss perhaps or to wait. So yeah, we really need to wait.
To put that in my own words, and this happens more so with JFS than the other organizations, that sometimes it takes these organizations a long time to process the payments that they approve and will notify us in writing that they will make. And that's notification to us directly from the organization, not from the tenant saying they have approval. When JFS, St. Vincent de Paul, United Way, Women Helping Women, when they contact us directly to say, we have approved this much for this tenant, and we know that gets them current, then we'll go ahead and, depending on the situation, we will either dismiss or we will appear in court or have our attorney continue the court case, meaning postpone the actual hearing until a later date when we expect the payment to have been received. In the interest of time, we have to press forward here. So when it comes to the actual court date, if we get to this point where we will be appearing in court, the day prior or around the day prior, the tenant will receive from us a message explaining, here's where the court is, here's where you walk in, here's where you can park. You'll have to go through metal detectors, and then it's those first doors on the left afterwards, just to make sure that we know that they're prepared to be there. And then the member of my team who is serving as witness, typically the person who posted the note, almost always the person who posted the notice. When the case is called, that representative of my team and our attorney are both standing there. In the majority of cases, the tenant at this point does not appear because they weren't planning to contest the case. I don't want to get into the specifics of what happens when they do appear for a myriad of reasons. I also don't want to get too far into risking giving legal advice here. But effectively, if we know that there's a plan in place for the rent to be paid and we know where it's coming from, and if there's an assistance organization involved, they've confirmed that they're going to send it. They just can't get it sent before the hearing date. We typically continue the case, sometimes dismiss, but more often continue the case until we should have received that rent payment. Another thing I want to point out is that Izzy and her team get involved whenever we know that there's an assistance organization, we're not allowed to apply on behalf of our tenants with any of the assistance organizations. We can reach out and see if there's funding available and then tell our tenant, hey, if you go apply, it's more likely. But as soon as there is an application in process, we ask them to hand it over to us because Izzy's team are literally professionals in getting rental assistance approved, getting all the paperwork sorted out. Oftentimes, I'm going to have to sign a W-9 form on behalf of TLP since TLP is the company receiving the assistance. We want to get the paperwork pushed for the tenant as quickly as possible and get them that assistance. In the event that the magistrate rules that the eviction should proceed in court, they issue a 7-day writ of restitution, which is basically giving the tenant 7 days to pay or vacate before the bailiff's office can be called to schedule a set out. So on day 8, the bailiff's office can be called to schedule, and then it is with the bailiff's deputies in person. Once we have it scheduled, we notify the tenants when it will be, because we really hope that they're out by then. On that date, with the bailiff's deputies, we knock on the door. A member of my team is present to open the door or drill out the locks if necessary. We have a company that we work with to provide trash out services so that we know we can get everything out of the apartment or the house fast enough to satisfy the sheriff's deputies so they won't leave without us being able to complete the set out. And then we change the locks, and the tenant has their stuff literally on the curb. And I've been present for this at times when the tenant still acted surprised that this was happening, regardless of all the communication, and they were calling people to help them get their stuff off the curb. It's devastating, more for the tenant than anyone else, but it's devastating for everyone involved when this happens, and we do everything that we can to avoid it. A couple of points I'd like to make here. One is that at any time until the set out, the case can be dismissed. Even after the 7-day writ has been issued, the tenant can pay everything that they owe, which at this point in our lease includes the legal fees. If they can pay everything that they owe, we will make the effort to get the case dismissed because it's going to show up in their background checks. And if they were able to come correct and get everything that they owed paid up, we want the case in their background check to show that it was dismissed, because dismissed means that it didn't proceed to the point of what most people consider. Some people think that anytime they get a notice that the lease is ending, that they're being evicted. That's not the case. But showing that there was a dismissal in their landlord-tenant history and their background check means that they were able to come to some sort of agreement with the landlord to prevent the set out. And we want to make sure that hits their record at this point so that when they are applying for other places, they have that opportunity. And we will take that call as a reference from other landlords, property managers, and we will be truthful. We will explain exactly what happened, but we will be clear about why the case was dismissed in this case. And I want to make sure people understand that this is a very slim minority of residential tenants in the greater Cincinnati area that this conversation pertains to. It's not like we're slinging a bunch of notices or filing tons of evictions every month. It's primarily tenants that we didn't place who wouldn't have met our qualifications when they moved in prior to our management in the first place. But hard times can hit anyone. And it's all the more reason to make sure that we and you, our listeners, are treating people dealing with this with dignity and respect while still getting to the outcome that you need as a landlord, the ability to generate revenue with your financial asset, which is that home. One more thing I want to add before I pass it to Izzy for final thoughts is that she talked about her team handling the entire process of the tenant, not passing it off to the landlord. The moment that we notify the landlord that the eviction process is happening is when we are endorsing the tenant to our attorney for eviction and getting a hearing date. And the reason is that the vast majority of times that we reach out to tenants because they're delinquent, the vast majority of 3-day notices that we post don't end up getting filed. We post that notice, and in those next 3 days, the tenant finds a way to pay their entire balance. That's the real message here, is that clearly communicating, treating people with respect, taking the time to talk to them on the phone. From my perspective and Izzy's perspective, having the staff that can afford to take the time to talk to these people on the phone is what helps them make the decision to get that rent paid. They should, by this point, realize that we care and that we're here to help them while serving our client, the landlord, and making sure that the legal process is followed.
So Slocomb, I want to just share from the owner's perspective at this point, the 3 things that I care about when it comes to handling evictions. So number 1 is just minimizing the vacancy, right? Everything that you guys have shared in terms of providing assistance, giving plenty of notice. Like the communication starts early. It's entirely possible. I've seen it happen before where a tenant moves out and doesn't notify. So, you get this huge gap even before you file for eviction. So that's one thing that an owner cares a lot about. Number two is having a good process, which has been outlined this entire episode, like step by step notice everything that happens to one, prevent the eviction. And then if it does occur, how it gets handled in a timely manner. And covering all your steps, right? Covering your ground on all that. And then number three is one that is probably the least importance to me, but it's actually collecting once you get the judgment that you want after the tenant is out. So number two is effectiveness on the tenant actually having a set out date. And number three is collections, which many people know are low likelihood, especially if you're inheriting the tenant from previously, where you don't have things like their place of employment or birth date or social security or the information that you need. But for tenants that are placed, I know that you guys have all the processes in place.
I'm going to play podcast host and ask Izzy. Izzy, when it comes to collecting after a tenant has been evicted, what are the things that you could have done in advance that give you the best opportunity or the best chances of getting any of that money that the tenant owes after they're gone?
Our counsel mentioned that place of work, definitely, if you can confirm that, car details will also help. And then ultimately, if we could, especially for inherited tenants, because these are really where the challenge is, ask them to renew their leases. Because when they renew, we offer a free application. So when they do a free application, we do get their details, which is the essential, the SSN and the date of birth. We're not saying that they will be leaving with a collection amount, but it's just that hedging the risk for the landlords.
The majority of our tenants leave without leaving a ledger balance, be clear. But the two big ones are date of birth and social security number. But then figuring out their place of work, what vehicles, those things help. And it also helps that our eviction attorney has a collections agency. And that's part of the reason that we chose to work with them, is that they are well versed in handling these situations. Izzy, is there anything else that you would like to point out, add, or ask me when it comes to the evictions process and explaining it to our listeners?
One last thing that we are also very big is documentation and the language. Any written communication, and even with text messages, because it is accepted as a valid documentation in court, making sure the language is something that you will not expose the TLP or the landlord for any legal risk. We are very particular on all the languages that we use in our recurring messages, especially when the conversation becomes highly emotional. Again, it's just basically treating people with respect, but also making sure that no misinformation is given. And despite how much you want to lessen the frustration, you still need to tell them what is going to happen, because it's their right. And everything should be documented so that if needed, there is something that we could also protect ourselves with, and also the landlords. So that's the only thing I would like to add.
Keep in mind that especially anything that first of all, anything that you say out loud could be recorded, calls, etc. Any message that you send in writing, the states of Ohio and Kentucky consider email and text message to be written notice. By no means would we send a 3-day notice to vacate through text message or email, but it means that correspondence does count as official. So keep that in mind when you are emailing, texting your tenants, that those are records that can be shared in court by either you or the tenant. So again, dignity and respect, professionalism, and also make sure that you're sticking to the message that you need to deliver to be able to move forward in the process. And the biggest message here overall is that the best way to handle this process, the thing that gets rents paid when tenants are in difficult positions, that gets tenants to recognize that they need to leave before things escalate to the point of a notice being filed, having an eviction on their landlord-tenant history and their background check. The thing that gets, I'm going to use dry investment language here, the thing that gets the financial asset that is the apartment or home performing financially, generating revenue again the fastest, whether that is the tenant paying or it is getting a new tenant in place, having suffered the lowest expenses and vacancy loss possible. It's treating your tenants with dignity and respect and compassion, and caring about these people and caring for them when they have to go through difficult times, even when those difficult times mean that they aren't paying the rent. It is still the best thing to do to treat these people well and do what you can for them while doing what you need to do to get your financial asset performing again. Most profitable way to handle this, or the way to avoid the most loss, is just treating people well. Listeners, Izzy, thank you. I appreciate you for joining us today. Listeners, thank you as well for joining. If you gained value from this episode, please do share it with a friend or share it on social media so other people can hear this message as well. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to the show so you're getting this content every week, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Quick disclaimer, the opinions expressed on this podcast are provided for informational purposes only. This is not an offer to buy or sell any securities, to make or consider any investment or course of action, and it is not an offer of agency from Slocomb Reed or Keller Williams 7 Hills Realty.